Imagine walking into a classroom on a Monday morning, and by Friday afternoon, you're part of a fascist movement. You're wearing a uniform. You're reporting classmates who break the rules. You're giving a salute that didn't exist a week ago, and you believe in it. Deeply, this isn't a dystopian novel. This actually happened. In 1967, in Palo Alto, California, in an ordinary high school, and it took just 5 days. The man who made it happen? A first-year history teacher named Ron Jones. His experiment would become one of the most terrifying demonstrations of human nature ever conducted. Because he didn't just teach his students about fascism. He showed them how easily they could become fascists themselves. This is the story of the third wave. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why it still haunts everyone who lived through it. Let's go back to April 1967. Ron Jones is teaching a world history class at Cubberley High School. They're studying Nazi Germany, and his students are asking the questions that everyone asks. How could ordinary Germans allow the Holocaust to happen? How could millions of people just go along with it? Didn't they know what was happening? Why didn't they stop it? Jones has heard these questions before. Every teacher who covers World War II hears them. And the usual answer is something about propaganda, or fear, or the economic conditions in post-war Germany. But as he looked at his students, sitting there so certain that they would never fall for something like that, so confident in their own moral superiority, Jones realized something. They didn't really understand. They couldn't understand, not intellectually, so he decided to show them. What he did next was completely unplanned. He didn't clear it with the school administration. He didn't get parental permission. He didn't even tell his students it was an experiment. He just started. It was a Monday. Jones walked into his third period class and did something unusual. He told everyone to sit down immediately, not in their usual casual way, but with proper posture. Feet flat on the floor, hands flat on the desk, sitting up straight. Now you might think this sounds minor, even silly. But here's what happened next. He made them do it again, and again, and again, until they could all sit down in perfect unison, in complete silence, in under 5 seconds. He timed them. He made it competitive. And something strange started happening. The students got into it. They liked it. They started trying harder, sitting up straighter, moving faster. They began to feel disciplined, powerful, united. Jones called this strength through discipline. That was day 1. And already something had shifted in the room. The usual slouching, chatting, casual atmosphere of a high school class had disappeared. It had been replaced by focus, order, a strange new energy. But Jones wasn't done. He added new rules. They had to stand beside their desks to ask or answer questions. They had to start every sentence with Mr. Jones. When they answered questions, they had to be brief, clear, and confident. No rambling, no hesitation. And here's the thing that nobody expected. The students loved it. Students who normally struggled in class were suddenly engaged. Kids who never participated were raising their hands. The entire dynamic had changed. Test scores went up, attention spans improved. Even students with learning difficulties were performing better. Teachers from other classes started noticing. They asked Jones what he was doing. Some were impressed, others were concerned, but nobody stopped him. On Tuesday, day 2, Jones added the second principle: strength through community. He invented a salute, a simple gesture, like a wave. He told students they had to salute each other whenever they passed in the hallways. And this salute, it was their secret. It meant you were part of something special, something bigger than yourself. This is when it really started to accelerate. Students began saluting each other between classes, in the cafeteria, in the parking lot. And when they did, they felt a connection, a sense of belonging. They were part of an inside group, an elite group. Everyone else was just an outsider. Jones also gave them a motto: strength through community. He made them repeat it in unison. And with every repetition, that feeling of unity grew stronger. They weren't just individuals anymore. They were part of a movement. And here's what's truly unsettling. Nobody was being forced. Nobody was threatened. In fact, students were voluntarily showing up to class early. They were bringing friends from other periods. Word was spreading through the school. Something exciting was happening in Mr. Jones's history class, and everyone wanted to be part of it. By Wednesday, the class had grown. Students who weren't even enrolled in the course were showing up. Jones had to move to a bigger room. Over 70 students were now involved. This is when he introduced the third principle: strength through action. Jones gave them assignments. He told them to recruit new members. He told them to design a banner with the movement symbol. He told them to create a membership card system. And they did, enthusiastically. But he also gave them something else, something darker. He told 3 students privately that their job was to report anyone who wasn't following the rules, anyone who criticized the movement, anyone who broke discipline. He created informants. And those 3 students? They took it seriously. They started reporting classmates. And when other students found out about this system, they weren't angry. They were careful. They watched what they said. They made sure they were following the rules, because nobody wanted to be reported. Think about what had happened in just 3 days. Jones had created a movement with its own salute, its own rules, its own insiders and outsiders, and its own surveillance system. And it had all happened voluntarily. Not one student was forced to participate. Yet the vast majority had embraced it completely. The school was buzzing with rumors. Some teachers were impressed by the newfound discipline. Others were worried, but nobody quite knew what to say. It all seemed so harmless on the surface, just an engaging teaching method, right? Thursday was day 4, and this is when Jones himself started to get scared. He walked into school that morning and saw students saluting each other everywhere, in the halls, on the lawn, dozens of them. The movement had spread beyond his control. Students were recruiting their friends from other schools. Parents were asking questions. The principal had heard something was going on. Jones realized he had to end this, but he also realized he had to do it right. He couldn't just tell them it was over. They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't believe what they'd become. He needed to show them. So he did something brilliant and terrifying. He introduced the 4th principle: strength through pride. He told his students that they were part of something historic, that there were thousands of high school students across the country doing the exact same thing they were doing, all part of a national youth movement dedicated to bringing change to America. And tomorrow, Friday, at noon, there would be a national announcement. A presidential candidate would appear on television to reveal the movement to the entire nation. The students were electrified. They weren't just playing anymore. This was real. They were part of something massive, something important, something that would change history. Jones told them to bring all their friends to the rally on Friday, to tell no one outside the movement, to be ready. And they believed him, completely. Friday arrived. At noon, over 200 students packed into the school auditorium. They'd brought friends. They'd brought posters they'd made with the movement symbol. They were dressed better than usual. Some had even worn matching outfits to look more uniform. The energy in that room must have been incredible and terrifying. These were teenagers, remember? Normal kids. And now they were sitting in rigid formation, waiting for their moment in history, ready to be part of something they thought was revolutionary. Jones stood at the front. He'd set up a television on a stand. He told them the announcement would begin any moment. They had to watch in complete silence, in complete discipline, to show their strength. He turned on the television. Static. Nothing but static. The students watched, and watched, waiting for their leader to appear, for the big reveal. But nothing came. Just static. And slowly, confusion began to ripple through the crowd. Then Jones turned off the television. And he told them the truth. There was no national movement. There was no presidential candidate. There were no thousands of students across the country. It had all been a lie, an experiment to show them how fascism happens. He turned off the lights, and he showed them something else, a film. Actual footage from Nazi Germany. The rallies, the salutes, the uniforms, the discipline, the community, the pride, the absolute certainty that they were part of something great. And as the students watched, they saw themselves. The same gestures, the same energy, the same unquestioning obedience, the same willingness to report on their friends, the same pride in being part of the in-group and looking down on the outsiders. The room was silent. Some students were crying, others were angry, at Jones, at themselves. Because in just 5 days, without violence, without threats, without any real coercion, they had become exactly what they thought they never could be. They had created a fascist movement, and they had loved it. One student later described it as feeling like they'd been slapped awake. They'd been so certain it could never happen to them. But it had. It did. Jones later said that some students never forgave him. Some thanked him. Many never spoke about it again. But every single one of them learned something that day that they could never unlearn. You cannot understand fascism just by reading about it. You cannot guard against it just by thinking you're smart enough to resist it. Because fascism doesn't announce itself as evil. It comes disguised as strength, as community, as pride, as purpose. It offers belonging, structure, clear answers in an uncertain world, and it feels good. That's the most disturbing part. It feels powerful and right and true. The third wave experiment has been criticized over the years. Some say it was unethical, that Jones went too far, that he manipulated teenagers without consent. And those criticisms have merit. Today, this experiment would never get past a school board, let alone an ethics committee. But here's what's undeniable. Those students learned something in 5 days that most people never truly understand. They learned that ordinary people, good people, smart people, can be seduced by authoritarianism. Not because they're evil or stupid, but because humans have deep psychological needs for belonging, purpose, and certainty. And authoritarian movements exploit those needs brilliantly. The third wave happened in California in 1967, in a liberal community, in a good school, with well-educated students who had been taught to question authority and think critically. And it still worked. In 5 days. So when you ask, how did ordinary Germans let it happen? Now you know. Not because they were uniquely evil or uniquely stupid, but because they were human. And human psychology has vulnerabilities that authoritarian movements know exactly how to exploit. The students of the third wave got a chance that most historical populations never get. They got to wake up from the dream while it was still just an experiment, before anyone got hurt, before it went too far. Ron Jones gave them that gift, even if the way he gave it was controversial. But we don't all get a Ron Jones to turn off the television and show us the truth. Which means we have to stay awake ourselves. We have to recognize the patterns. The appeal to strength and discipline, the creation of in-groups and out-groups, the salutes and symbols, the surveillance of each other, the unquestioning certainty, the pride in belonging to something that feels powerful and right. These things still happen. They're happening right now, in different forms, in different places. And the lesson of the third wave is this. It can happen to anyone, including you, including me. The only defense is awareness and humility and a constant questioning of our own certainties. Because the scariest thing about the third wave experiment isn't that it happened. It's how easy it was, how fast it happened, and how good it felt to everyone involved until it didn't.